12 years of marriage, and one moment that ruined everything. Julian is celebrating his anniversary with Clarissa, but her smile hides a betrayal. When a waitress whispers that his wife has put something in his glass, the hero's world shatters. This is a story about shock, pain, and the choice to break or become stronger. Julian sat across from Clarissa at the restaurant table, the clink of glasses and murmur of voices filling the air. 12 years of marriage, promises, fights, silences, and mornings half spent over coffee had led to this night. He'd thought it would feel like a triumph, proof they'd endured. But something was off. Clarissa's smile came too easily. Her eyes darted away when he tried to hold her gaze. "To 12 golden years," she said, raising her wine glass. Her voice was warm, but it didn't reach her eyes. Julian tightened his grip on his fork, his knuckles paling. "Is it me?" he thought. "Am I reading too much into this? 12 years teach you to doubt your instincts, to smooth over cracks in the name of love. You tell yourself her distance is just a phase, her late nights just work. Because if you don't, you're left staring at a truth you're not ready for. Maybe the woman you swore to love forever stopped loving you back." His sister Marta, seated beside him, brushed his arm. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her voice low, her eyes too perceptive. Julian forced a smile. "Just tired. It's fine." But it wasn't. The weight in his chest grew heavier with every laugh Clarissa tossed to the table, every glance she shared with her cousin Jared across from her. Jared, always too loud, too familiar, leaning into her stories like they shared secret. Julian sipped his wine, the bitterness sharp on his tongue. "We're here to celebrate us," he reminded himself. She picked this place. She wanted this. Clarissa had insisted on the restaurant, said it had to be special, memorable. He'd agreed, hoping it meant she wanted to rebuild what had been fraying between them. But now, watching her, he felt like a guest at his own anniversary. She leaned forward, her hand grazing his. "You okay, love?" she asked, her tone soft but practiced. Julian nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, just taking it all in." Her fingers lingered a moment, then slipped away. He stared at the spot where her hand had been, the warmth fading fast. When did we start performing for each other? The thought cut deeper than he expected. Martin nudged him again, her brow furrowed. "You sure you're good?" she whispered. Julian didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he pushed back his chair, mumbling something about the restroom. Clarissa barely noticed, her attention already back on Jared, who was mid-story, gesturing wildly. Her laugh followed Julian as he walked away, sharp and jagged, like a blade he couldn't dodge. The hallway to the restroom was dim, the noise of the dining room fading behind him. Each step echoed in his chest, a rhythm of doubt and dread. "What's wrong with me?" he thought. "Why can't I shake this?" He wanted to believe it was nothing, stress, fatigue, the weight of 12 years pressing too hard. But deep down, he knew better. Something was wrong, and it wasn't him. He was almost at the restroom door when a voice stopped him. "Mr. Rowe." It was soft but urgent. Julian turned. A young waitress, her name tag reading Aisha, stood there, clutching her apron. Her eyes were wide, nervous but steady. I saw something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your wife. She put something in your glass." Julian froze. The air thickened, his pulse loud in his ears. "What?" he managed, his voice flat, disbelieving. Aisha glanced down the hall, then stepped closer. "I saw her." She looked around, made sure no one was watching, then dropped something into your wine. It dissolved fast. I thought you should know." His mind blanked, then flooded. No, she wouldn't. But Aisha's face, earnest, scared, held no room for doubt. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice tighter now. She nodded. "I wouldn't lie about this." Julian stared at her, the world tilting under his feet. 12 years of trust, of shared dreams and quiet nights, shattered in a single sentence. "Thank you," he said, his tone steady despite the storm inside. Aisha hesitated, then nodded and slipped away. Julian pushed open the restroom door, locked himself in a stall, and gripped the walls, his breath shallow. Clarissa, my wife. The woman he'd built a life with, the one he'd forgiven 1,000 times, had tried to poison him. The word felt absurd, impossible, but it lodged in his chest like a stone. He splashed cold water on his face, the sting grounding him. Staring at his reflection, he saw a man he barely recognized. Tired, betrayed, but not broken. Not yet. She doesn't get to win. The thought was quiet but fierce. He straightened, dried his hands, and made a choice. He wouldn't confront her. Not now. He'd play her game, but on his terms. Julian walked back to the table, his steps measured, his face composed. Clarissa looked up, her smile bright but brittle. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Perfect," he replied, sitting down. He meant it, because now he had a plan. Julian stood in the dim restroom, the cold water still dripping from his face. Aisha's words echoed in his head. "Your wife put something in your glass." His heart pounded, each beat a hammer against the fragile wall of disbelief. Clarissa, my Clarissa. 12 years of shared mornings, quiet apologies, and dreams they'd stitched together, now unraveling in a single moment. He gripped the sink, his reflection staring back, eyes wide with shock but hardening with resolve. She doesn't get to do this. He dried his hands, the paper towel crumpling in his fist. "What did you put in my glass, Clarissa?" The question burned, but he wouldn't ask it. Not yet. Confronting her now would give her the upper hand. Let her spin a lie he'd once been fool enough to believe. No. He'd play along, watch her, and find the truth. His mind raced, landing on a plan, simple, risky but necessary. He'd switch the glasses. Let her drink her own deceit. Julian stepped out of the restroom, the hallway's faint hum pulling him back to the present. His legs felt heavy, but his steps were steady. The dining room's glow hit him as he returned, chandeliers casting light across the table where Clarissa sat, radiant, untouchable. She laughed at something Jared said, her hand brushing his arm. The sight twisted in Julian's gut, but he buried it. "Focus." He slid into his chair, forcing a smile. "Missed anything good?" he asked, his voice light, practiced. Clarissa turned, her smile quick but sharp. "Just Jared's terrible stories," she said, her eyes flicking over him, searching. "What are you looking for? Guilt? Fear?" Julian held her gaze, his expression calm, unreadable. Marta, beside him, raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Her silence felt like a lifeline, a reminder he wasn't alone. The table buzzed with chatter, Jared's voice too loud, Marta's quiet quips, the clink of silverware. Julian's wine glass sat untouched, its contents a silent threat. Clarissa's glass, half empty, rested near her plate. He waited, his pulse loud in his ears. Then, as Jared launched into another anecdote, Julian moved. His left hand adjusted his napkin, drawing eyes away, while his right slid Clarissa's glass to his place and his to hers. The switch was smooth, invisible, a sleight of hand born from necessity. His fingers trembled for a split second, but he steadied them. Done. Clarissa didn't notice. She was too busy laughing, her head tilted toward Jared. Julian leaned back, his breath shallow but controlled. "If you meant to hurt me, let's see how you like it." The thought wasn't vengeful. Not yet. It was survival. He lifted her glass, the one she'd meant for herself, and took a small sip. The wine was sharp, clean, no hint of anything wrong. He set it down, watching her. Minutes passed. 5, then 10. Clarissa sparkled, her voice bright as she recounted a trip they'd taken years ago. But Julian saw the cracks. Her hand lingered on her glass, fingers hesitant. Her smile flickered when she thought no one was looking. "You know something's coming, don't you?" He kept his eyes on her, casual but relentless, every gesture catalogued. Marta nudged him. "You're staring," she whispered. "Just listening," he lied, his voice low. Then it began. Clarissa's laugh faltered mid-sentence. She blinked, slow, then fast, like she was shaking off a fog. Her hand rose to her temple, pressing lightly. "It's warm in here," she muttered, her voice thinner than before. Jared turned. "You okay?" She nodded, but her movements were sluggish, her fingers loosening around the glass. His glass, the one she'd tampered with. Julian's heart thudded, but his face stayed neutral. Clarissa tried to stand, her chair scraping softly. "Just need a second," she said, but her knees buckled. She sank back, then slid sideways, her body folding like a marionette with cut strings. The table erupted, gasps, chairs pushing back, Jared lunging to catch her. "Clarissa!" he shouted, his voice raw. Marta grabbed Julian's arm, her nails digging in. "What's happening?" she hissed. Julian didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on Clarissa, sprawled on the floor, her chest rising unevenly. Someone called for an ambulance. Aisha appeared, phone in hand, already dialing. Her glance met Julian's, brief but heavy with understanding. Clarissa's eyes fluttered, half open, finding his. For a moment they held, hers wide, pupils dilated, his steady, unyielding. You know, he thought. You know, I switched them. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then her eyes closed. Julian stood, slow, deliberate. She said she felt hot, he said, his voice calm, factual. Jared, kneeling beside her, looked up, pale. She was fine a minute ago. Julian nodded. She was. Inside, he was a storm, shock, betrayal, a flicker of guilt for what he'd done. But he buried it. She started this. Marta's hand stayed on his arm, her grip tight. Julian, she said, barely audible. Did you? He shook his head, just enough for her to see. Not now. The room spun with chaos. Waiters rushing, guests whispering, the distant wail of a siren growing closer. Julian crouched beside Clarissa, opposite Jared. Her hand was limp, clammy. Clarissa, he said softly, can you hear me? No response. Her breathing was shallow, her face slack. He held her hand, not out of love, but to anchor himself. You tried to erase me. The thought was cold, clear, a blade cutting through the fog of 12 years. Aisha's voice cut through. Ambulance is here. Julian stood, stepping back as medics rushed in. They moved with quiet efficiency, checking her pulse, lifting her onto a stretcher. Jared followed, frantic, while Marta stayed by Julian's side. What did she do? She asked, her voice low, urgent. Julian met her eyes. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm going to find out. Julian stood over Clarissa's crumpled form, the restaurant a blur of chaos around him. Her collapse had been quiet, almost graceful, but it shattered the evening's facade. Medics knelt beside her, checking her pulse, their voices clipped and efficient. Jared hovered, his face pale, hands shaking as he repeated her name. Clarissa, come on, wake up. Julian's heart thundered, but his face remained a mask of calm. Inside, he was a tangle of shock, rage, and a strange, cold clarity. You did this to yourself. The dining room buzzed with panic, guests whispering, chairs scraping, a glass tipping over in the fray. Marta gripped Julian's arm, her nails biting into his skin. What the hell just happened? She hissed, her eyes searching his. He didn't answer, couldn't. His gaze stayed on Clarissa, her chest rising faintly under the medic's touch. You tried to poison me. The truth sat heavy in his chest, a stone he couldn't dislodge. He'd switched the glasses, and now she lay there, caught in her own trap. She said she felt hot. Julian offered, his voice steady, loud enough for Jared to hear. It was true, a fragment of fact to anchor him. Jared looked up, eyes wild. She was fine, laughing, toasting. How? His voice cracked. Julian nodded, his expression neutral. She was. He let the words hang, letting Jared fill the silence with his own panic. Marta's grip tightened. Julian, she whispered, you knew something? He met her eyes, his own unyielding. Not now, he said low and firm. Aisha, the waitress, stood at the edge of the scene, her phone still in hand from calling the ambulance. Her glance met Julian's, a fleeting acknowledgement of the truth they shared. She'd seen Clarissa tamper with his glass, had risked everything to warn him. Her courage had shifted the night's course, and Julian felt a surge of gratitude, though he couldn't show it yet. He crouched beside Clarissa, opposite the medics, taking her limp hand. It was clammy, lifeless. Clarissa, he said softly, can you hear me? No response. Her eyes, half open, flickered but didn't focus. The medics worked fast, sliding her onto a stretcher. Pulses weak but steady, one said. We're taking her now. Jared scrambled to his feet, following them. I'm going with her, he said, his voice desperate. Julian stood, stepping back. I'll follow, he told the medic, his tone measured. The man nodded, and the stretcher rolled out, Clarissa's form small and still beneath the blanket. The restaurant fell into a stunned hush as the medics left, the siren's wail fading outside. Guests stared, some whispering, others pretending not to. Julian felt their eyes, but ignored them. Marta stayed close, her presence a quiet anchor. You're too calm, she said, her voice low, accusing. Julian turned to her, his jaw tight. What do you want me to do? Fall apart. She didn't flinch, but her eyes softened. I want you to tell me what you know. He exhaled, the weight of the night pressing harder. Aisha saw her put something in my glass, he said, barely audible. Marta's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. I switched them. That's why he trailed off, the words too heavy to finish. Marta's hand found his, squeezing hard. Jesus, Julia. You could have, she stopped, shaking her head. You did what you had to. Her words were a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of doubt. They moved toward the exit, the restaurant's glow dimming behind them. Aisha stood near the door, arms crossed, looking smaller than before. Julian paused. Thank you, he said, his voice low but firm. She nodded, her eyes bright with something like relief. I couldn't stay quiet, she said. You did the right thing, he replied, meaning every word. She turned away, disappearing into the staff corridor. Outside, the night was sharp, the city's lights blinking indifferently. Julian's car waited in the lot, but he didn't move yet. He stood on the sidewalk, Marta beside him, the ambulance's red strobes fading in the distance. What now? She asked. Julian stared at the pavement, his hands clenching. I go to the hospital. I need answers. Marta nodded, her silence heavy with understanding. I'm coming with you. The drive was a blur, the city streets a smear of neon and shadow. Julian's mind churned. What was it, Clarissa? A drug? Poison? The betrayal cut deeper than the act itself. 12 years, and she planned this, here, on their anniversary, surrounded by family, friends' lies. He glanced at Marta, her profile tense in the passenger seat. You don't have to stay, he said. She snorted. Like I leave you now. Her loyalty steadied him, a reminder that not everyone had turned against him. At the hospital, the emergency room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Julian sat in a plastic chair, his suit wrinkled, tie askew. Marta paced, her heels clicking on the tile. A nurse approached, her face kind but guarded. She's stable, she said. Unconscious, but her vitals are holding. We're running tests. Julian nodded, his throat tight. Can I see her? The nurse hesitated. Not yet. Soon. She walked away, leaving him with more questions than answers. Marta sank into the chair beside him. What do you think she wanted? She asked, her voice low. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. To get rid of me, he said, the words bitter. I don't know why. Not yet. He replayed the night, the toast, her laugh, the moment he'd switched the glasses. Had she meant to kill him? Disable him? The uncertainty gnawed, but so did his resolve. I'm not done here. A woman in plain clothes approached, a badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Rowe, she said, her voice brisk. Detective Rosario. Can we talk? Julian stood, glancing at Marta. She's my sister, he said. Rosario nodded. Fine. Somewhere private. They followed her to a small room, bare except for a table and chairs. Rosario flipped open a notebook. We found a substance in your wife's system. Benzoprex. Know it. Julian shook his head. It's a paralytic used in trials. Non-lethal, but it can knock you out. You didn't drink your wine, did you? No. Julian said, his voice even. A waitress warned me. Said she saw Clarissa put something in my glass. Rosario's pen paused. You're saying she tried to drug you? Julian nodded. I switched the glasses. Rosario's eyes narrowed, but she wrote it down. That's a hell of a story, Mr. Rowe. Julian met her gaze. It's the truth. She closed her notebook. We'll need your statement. The restaurant's pulling footage. If this checks out, it's a criminal matter. Julian nodded, his mind already racing ahead. Clarissa's plan had failed, but the why haunted him. What did I miss? He thought of her smile, her secrets, the distance that had grown between them. Marta touched his shoulder as they left the room. You're still here, she said. That's what matters. Julian didn't reply, but her words anchored him. He wasn't broken yet, and he wouldn't be. Julian sat in the hospital's stark waiting room, the hum of fluorescent lights drilling into his skull. Clarissa was in a room down the hall, stable but unconscious, her betrayal now a cold fact. The antiseptic smell clung to him, mixing with the weight of the night. Marta paced nearby, her heels clicking like a metronome. You haven't said much, she said, stopping to face him. Julian's hands were clasped, knuckles pale. What's there to say? His voice was low, steady, but inside, he was unraveling. 12 years, Clarissa. How we get here? He replayed the moment he'd switched the glasses, her collapse, the look in her eyes, recognition, not fear. She'd known he'd outplayed her. But why? What had driven her to drug him on their anniversary, surrounded by people they called family? The question gnawed, a splinter he couldn't pull out. Marta sat beside him, her hand on his arm. You don't have to do this alone, she said. Her words were soft but firm, a tether to the world he still trusted. Detective Rosario had called an hour ago. Her voice clipped. We've got prelims. Benzoprex in her blood, enough to paralyze but not kill. Restaurant footage shows her tampering with your glass. Your story holds. Julian had nodded, the phone heavy in his hand. We're searching your home office, she'd added. Anything we should know? He told her about Clarissa's locked file cabinet, the key taped under her desk. Check it, he'd said. Now he waited, the truth closing in. He stood, needing to move. I'm going home, he told Marta. Her eyes narrowed. Now? I need answers, he cut in. Not her excuses. Marta hesitated, then nodded. I'm driving. They left the hospital, the night air sharp against Julian's skin. The drive was silent, Marta's presence a quiet strength. At home, the house felt foreign, its familiar corners tainted. Julian went straight to the office, Marta trailing him. Clarissa's desk was too neat, her file cabinet locked, as always. He found the key where he'd told Rosario, taped beneath a drawer. The cabinet opened with a soft click, revealing folders of tax forms, receipts, and then, tucked behind a charity flyer, an envelope labeled Sunset Contingency. His stomach dropped. Inside were documents, a medical release form with his forged signature, a power of attorney granting Clarissa control if he was incapacitated, and a draft deed transferring their house to her name. The signatures were close to his, but the loops were wrong, the spacing off. She forged it all. Julian's hands shook as he laid the papers out. Marta peered over his shoulder, her breath catching. Jesus, Julia. She was planning to, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. The documents painted a clear picture. Drug him, declare him unfit, seize everything. He moved to Clarissa's tablet, left carelessly in the living room. No password. Her email was open, a trapdoor to her secrets. He searched Sunset. One thread appeared, with a woman named Anika West. The emails were clinical, coded but damning. He thinks it's renewal. Its conclusion, Clarissa wrote. Accounts ready. POA's set. Just need the trigger, Anika replied. Anniversary's clean. He's slowing down, Clarissa answered. Julian's chest tightened. The trigger was the drug. The plan was to erase him, financially, legally, quietly. Another email, to Jared. 72 hours, no contact. Keep distance. Jared, her cousin, her confidant, her accomplice. Julian printed the emails, his hand steady now. He forwarded them to himself, backed them up. Marta watched, silent but fierce. She's a monster, she said finally. Julian shook his head. No, she's desperate. The distinction mattered. Clarissa wasn't evil, just selfish, willing to burn him to build her own future. He called his lawyer, Thomas, and arranged to meet at dawn. Bring everything, Thomas said. Julian hung up, the weight of evidence grounding him. He drove to the hospital alone, Marta staying to guard the documents. Clarissa was awake, sitting up in a pale gown, her face bare of makeup but composed. A cop stood outside her door. Julian entered, shutting it behind him. Her eyes met his, cautious but defiant. You came, she said, voice scratchy. Why? He asked, standing at the foot of her bed. Why drug me? Why forge my signature? Why plan it all? Clarissa's lips parted, then closed. She looked away, fingers twisting the blanket. You wouldn't understand, she said. Try me. Julian pressed, his voice hard. She sighed, her facade cracking. I was trapped. Your name, your success, it overshadowed me. I wanted out my own life. Julian's jaw clenched. You could have left. Divorce me. Taken half. Why this? Her eyes flashed. Half wasn't enough. The admission hit like a fist. Julian stepped closer. You looked around to make sure no one saw. Aisha did. She saved me. Clarissa flinched, her composure slipping. It wasn't supposed to kill you, she said, voice low. Just slow you down. Enough for the papers. Julian stared, the woman he'd loved now a stranger. You wanted everything, he said. Even my life. She looked at him, tears welling but not falling. I'm sorry, she whispered. Julian shook his head. No, you're not. You're sorry it didn't work. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Julian, do you hate me? He paused, hand on the door. No, he said. I just see you now. He walked out, the cop's nod a silent confirmation. She wasn't going anywhere. Outside, Marta waited in the hall. You okay? She asked, her voice soft. Julian nodded, though his chest ached. "I will be." She hugged him, brief but fierce. "You're stronger than this," she said. He clung to her words, a shield against the pain. Rosario met him in the lobby, clipboard in hand. "Her statement matches yours. Footage, emails, documents, it's enough. She'll be booked on release." Julian nodded. "Thank you." He drove home as dawn broke, the city waking around him. The house loomed, a shell of memories he'd soon leave behind. He sat at the kitchen table, the forged documents spread out, a map of Clarissa's betrayal. He planned to end me, but he hadn't ended. He'd survived, thanks to Aisha's courage, Marta's loyalty, his own refusal to break. The truth was his now, and with it, a path forward. Julian stood in his new apartment. The city's hum a faint pulse through the window. The trial was over, Clarissa's fate sealed. 2 years probation, 5 years barred from controlling any finances. No jail time, but the headlines screamed scandal, CEO's wife and poison plot. Julian ignored them, his inbox overflowing with reporters' pleas and friends' cautious, "Are you okay?" messages. He deleted them all. The world could talk. He was done explaining. The apartment was small, bare, a blank slate. No traces of Clarissa, no echoes of their 12 years. He'd sold their house, the one they'd renovated together, its walls now someone else's story. Here, he woke to his own rhythm. Coffee at dawn, walks by the river, work when he chose. The pain lingered, a bruise in his chest, but it no longer ruled him. "She tried to end me," he thought, staring at the empty walls. "But I'm still here." Marta had been his anchor through it all. She'd shown up the day after Clarissa's arrest, arms full of groceries, her presence a quiet defiance against the chaos. "You need to eat," she'd said, unpacking eggs and bread. They'd cooked in silence, the scrape of the pan grounding him. Now, she came every Sunday, her visits a ritual. Last week, she'd raised a glass of juice and said, "But different now. Stronger." Julian had smiled, faint but real. Surviving does that. She'd shaken her head. "No, choosing to live does." Her words stuck, a spark in the dark. He hadn't just survived Clarissa's betrayal. He'd chosen to rise from it. That choice led him to Aisha, the waitress who'd saved him. Her letter arrived a month after the trial, slipped under his door, handwritten and raw. "You believed me when it mattered," she wrote. "In a world that tells people like me to stay quiet, that was everything." She'd refused a bribe from Anika West, Clarissa's accomplice, to recant her story. Instead, she'd saved the evidence, her courage a beacon. Julian read the letter again, its edges worn from handling. Aisha was studying pre-law now, inspired by the night that had upended his life. He picked up his phone and called Julia, his firm's HR head. "I'm rehiring," he said. "Internship legal track. Aisha Malik. Draw it up today." Julia paused. "You're back." "Not fully," he said. "Just making sure the right people get a chance." He hung up, a weight lifting. Aisha deserved more than thanks. She deserved a future. He met her at a campus cafe, her books stacked like armor. "Didn't think you'd reach out," she said, her smile shy. Julian sat across from her. "You saved my life. I owe you." They talked about law, truth, the cost of speaking up. When he told her about the internship, her eyes widened. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you pointed the fire," he said. "Not everyone does." She laughed, soft, and shook her head. "You saved yourself." The words stayed with him, a truth he was starting to believe. The trial had been clinical, the courtroom a stage for facts, not feelings. Clarissa sat across from him, dressed sharply, her lawyer whispering strategies. She never looked at him, her gaze fixed on some distant point. The judge listed charges: attempted poisoning, fraud, conspiracy. Her voice flat, final. Evidence piled high. Aisha's testimony, the forged documents, emails with Anika and Jared. Clarissa's defense claimed desperation, a cry for freedom from stifling marriage. Julian didn't react. The truth didn't need his anger. It stood alone. She'd walked free, probation her only chain. Jared had vanished, rumors placing him abroad. Julian didn't care. He'd let them go, their shadows no longer his burden. The press spun stories. Some called it a stunt, others a tragedy, but Julian stayed silent. He declined interviews, let the headlines fade. His victory wasn't in their words, but in his choices. To rebuild, to trust again, to live. He launched the Aisha Initiative a month later, a scholarship for women in law who showed courage under pressure. At its announcement, he spoke to a small crowd, his voice steady. Betrayal wears a familiar face, he said, but so does bravery. This is for those who speak when it's hard. Aisha, in the audience, cried. Later, she hugged him, whispering, "You didn't have to." "I did," he said. "You shouldn't be brave alone." His firm, raw strategies hummed again under his touch. He wasn't the man he'd been, driven, blind to cracks in his marriage. Now, he led with purpose, his door open to new ideas, new voices. Julia ran the initiative, her efficiency a quiet gift. Marta, ever present, teased him over dinner. "You're softer now," she said. "Wiser," he corrected, and they laughed, the sound healing. One evening, Julian walked to the river near his apartment. The water was calm, reflecting the city's glow. He held a stone, smooth and heavy, turning it in his hand. The pain of Clarissa's betrayal still lived in him, a scar that ached in quiet moments. He thought of their wedding, her laugh, the promises they'd broken. Then he thought of Aisha's letter, Marta's loyalty, his own strength. He threw the stone. It sank, ripples spreading wide. He didn't cry, didn't shout. He stood there, breathing, the air sharp and clean. The world felt lighter, not whole, but possible. He'd lost a marriage, a life he'd thought was his. But he'd gained something else, himself. "I'm mine again," he thought, and the truth of it steadied him. He turned from the river, the city alive around him, and walked home. The next morning, he opened his journal, untouched since their wedding year. He flipped past old hopes, old hurts, and found a blank page. "She tried to end me," he wrote, "but I'm still here, and I'm choosing what comes next." He closed the book, the words a quiet vow. The pain would fade, but his strength wouldn't. He'd survived, not by chance, but by listening to Aisha, to Marta, to the truth. That was his victory, and it was enough.